Perspectives with Asima Silva, and of course we are coming to you live from downtown Worcester at the studios of WCUW, the People's Channel. And today we have preserved pages, so we're going to be talking about the Worcester Art Museum. Boy, what an absolutely gorgeous exhibit this is that is going on right now. Now you can't see it. It's mine. No, we will be showing you some of these great images that are here as well, and we'll be talking a little bit about where these images come from as well. So here we are in Persia and India. Hopefully, as a matter of fact, I know you can take a look at that, but that's home territory for you.
It is.
You know, for your parents came from
yes,
there.
Yes, yeah. And my heritage comes from the whole Persian, Turkish, Indian heritage. So this was a great story that I wanted to share. An event that's happening at the Worcester Art Museum, and today we have the person who introduced me and brought me into the fold of, working with them and just helping out, but they did most of the work and all of the art exhibits and the history and bringing people in, and it's a great exhibit. It's come out after 25 plus years, I believe.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while. So we have
25
Vivian.
years in the making.
So yeah, I mean some happened, but like the most recent, some works were shown maybe at the furthest is 15 years. So 25 to 15 years. Yeah.
But all of it was, I don't believe, shown all together, like the way it is today.
That is what's very special about this exhibition.
And so before we go into details, we have Vivian here with us, who's the Asian art director at the Worcester Art Museum. And, so all disclosure, full disclosure, that Vivian contacted me. Actually, we have a common person who was very interested in these art exhibits because she's also Persian, and Maru Morgan from the Morgan family of Worcester contacted, and she knew me too, and said, let me get all these people together who are interested in these kind of art projects and art exhibits. Beautiful, beautiful paintings. So let's get into it, because there's some pieces that are amazing that will show you that we hold a lot of treasure that most other art museums do not hold.
Well, this is something, of course. I mean, the Worcester Art Museum is a world-class art museum. It is, often as people talk about it, I don't know if it's as undiscovered a jewel anymore as it was a number of years ago. I agree. I mean, I think that, there has been so much done, so much where you have opened it up. You've opened up the door so that everybody can come in and enjoy what's happening. As the Higgins Armory, I mean, I think brought in a new crowd of people too. But this is quite the exhibit. How do you curate something like this and put an exhibit like this together?
Well, this exhibition, actually we have been wanting for the last couple of years to do an exhibition focused on Islamic art and culture at the museum, because we recognized there was kind of a lack of it, mostly because our Islamic Art Collection, which is phenomenal, especially for our size of a museum. We're not the Met, but but especially for our size museum, we do have some very famous pages from important manuscripts from Persia and also from India too. And so then we were thinking of different ideas. We threw around myself, our chief curator at the time, John Seidel, and Jeffrey Forgain, who was formerly at the Higgins, now is the curator of Arms and Armor and Medieval Art at the museum. And we were just throwing around ideas and about how to give a place for educators and for the community members, our public who come to the museum and are very interested, especially in the last couple of years, thinking about Islamophobia and all the things going on in society. There is definitely a desire to learn about Islamic art and culture, and but we didn't have a place really at the museum we could point to. You can go here. We have two cases in our permanent South Asian gallery, but those are of works of mostly Mughal ceramics and also metalwork, and also Persian ceramics. And so that was not adequate, I think, to capture what people wanted to use to talk about Islamic art and culture and to learn about it, to educators that wanted to talk about it with their students. They would come and we could only point to that one or a few objects. So then, during our conversations, we finally realized that let's just do an exhibition, and let's do it on our amazing paintings collection, Islamic paintings collection. And so, because it's been, like we said, in storage for so long, and because I should also explain, because at museums, not just ours, all across the board, we are also preservers of a very ancient to contemporary materials, and so we take that responsibility very seriously. So these paintings are works on paper, and all of our works on paper, also photographs, that type of material can only be shown for 3 months, and then it has to go into storage and be in the dark, what we call it, for 5 years at least.
Wow, isn't that amazing?
This is your chance
so
to
this
see
really
it.
is.
So this really is.
Why is it? I mean, this seems remarkable to me. Why is it that Worcester? Who was it that had the foresight? Just over the years, people had the foresight to collect this. It seems as if a museum the size of Worcester may very well have passed on these types of pieces.
Yeah, it's a very good question. So I also wondered that too when I was learning more about our collection. And so I found out in 1935, you will see in the exhibition, when you look at the accession number for each object, many of these works came, or pretty much almost half of the works in the exhibition in our collection come in 1935. And it's very interesting in the interwar period between War I and War II, a lot of Islamicists immigrated to the U.S. and kind of that caused Islamic art and culture studies to flourish during that time. And in 1935, we purchased from one of the foremost art dealers at that time and collectors of Islamic art, Georges Demotte. And he had just passed away, and his collection was available to purchase from his gallery in New York. And so I'm not sure, I would guess the director at the time of the museum, probably on the advice of some scholars, decided to purchase those. So that's why a lot of the important pages we have were purchased during that time. And over the years also other collectors have given very precious pages to add to our collection. So it's a very strong collection. In total we have about 50 pages. And I myself am not an Islamic art specialist by training. So then when we decided to do this exhibition of our collection, there was this sense of urgency, or we should do this sooner rather than later. And the time for me to do all that research would have taken long, or a couple years. So then I tapped into, or I invited David Roxburgh, who's a professor of Islamic art at Harvard, and Hannah Hayden, who was a graduate student there at Harvard too, and they are guest co-curators of the exhibition, and they put the exhibition together in less than a year. And so, but they did a superb job. And
because you had all the raw material there that was able then to be
and the
put
expertise.
In it. And the expertise, right. It's almost as if it was not. It wasn't forgotten. I mean, I suppose people knew that it was there, but hidden a little bit. So some of these pieces probably have not been displayed in more than the 5 years that they need to be dark. Some of these may not have been displayed in many decades.
They haven't, at least, I can safely say all of them have not been shown for 15 years or more.
Yeah, and not all together the way that they are now
and
as
never
well.
all together. No. There was an Islamic art gallery in the museum, but also I think because of this restriction that works on paper have, it also had the metal work, and also I think some Islamic rugs that we have also in the collection that unfortunately we didn't bring
This is something that I've always loved about museums, though, the way in which you take these pieces and put them together. So by displaying
Right,
all
that by
50
itself is
of
art.
these, right, by putting them all together, then we're able to get this incredible experience. Even if we've seen some of these pieces individually, seeing them all together, we get a totally different learning experience, but a totally different artistic experience as well.
Right.
Just a beautiful show.
I mean, I saw just a viewing of it, and I can say when I saw, I mean, I've seen some of these paintings at different museums, you know, historically in books and this and that. But seeing them live, you can see such detail and the color and the vibrancy of it. It's just absolutely beautiful.
I'll try and show a couple. I was just as we were looking through it. I mean, you know, you, for example, Asma, were saying who some of these individuals were, just as you saw.
Those the kind of dress that, you know, the Maharajas, the, you know, nobles would wear.
Of that, yeah. I mean, so these are just trying to get some shots here of some of these just
so
really
there's a lot
nice
of Mughal
pieces.
portraiture.
Yes.
And they do have that certain convention of where Hannah and David do talk about these conventions and types that are seen in especially albums.
Right.
So this would have been in a book then.
Yes. So
and now we're seeing it as a piece of art.
Yes, so the title of the exhibition is Preserved Pages, Book as Art in Persian and India from 1300 to 1800. And that for us living here in this society, we might not think readily of book as art, but they did a great job organizing all of our diverse material in the collection to talk about how the book was so central to the making of images in Islamic cultures or Persian cultures, Persian societies. So they really talked about how first the reason to make illustrations was to illustrate the narratives of these especially luxury or court-commissioned manuscripts. And then slowly as that tradition flourished, then also collectors got interested in, I just like this page, this is a beautiful picture, let me just take it out. And they would separate it and start making albums. They would collect them and create their kind of like a collector's scrapbook, and if you will. So it's a very interesting context for making images
as well. Just because if I can see if I can get this so that I'm showing it to the right place here. But for example, now here's this image of women. The first two that we showed were more of rulers, but here is an image of women. Is there something that we can gain or find out about how women or some of these different pieces are, because of the way that they were presented on these pages, that we learn something through the history and through the art?
Yeah, well, definitely, especially for this section on women at court, it talks about how women had this kind of dual role. Many of the images you will see, like the one you were just showing, are of lovers meeting. So she's off and kind of braving the storm and the wind to go meet her lover. So these illicit...
little racy. What year is this?
A little
1300.
1300, yeah.
She's all clothed.
Things have not
Yes.
changed a lot, though.
But then they also, and there's some pages, the illustrated pages, talking about how women at court had power too, and especially Mughal, in the Mughal court, they had amazing amount of power. They could also commission works of art themselves too. So there's this kind of duality of their
talked about
identity.
This, Asma, about this misconception
that Muslims and
somehow
Islam
Muslim
had,
women,
were
Islam,
oppressed.
are not allowed to speak. I mean, I think it's one of the reasons that we have perspectives with Asma Silva.
Right, exactly.
Yes, yeah.
But one thing I just wanted to clarify for the Muslims who may be watching or listening, because I know this is something very sensitive to them. I mean, a lot of people will consider this Islamic art, but a lot of Muslims will consider Islamic art has to do with Quran or the Arabic calligraphy that has to do with the Quran. This is art by Muslims, but a lot of the illustrations, because it has figurines and faces, would not be considered necessarily Islamic, meaning, even though they might be illustrations of some religious story or some religious background, they're not necessarily considered Islamic art. They're just considered art to them, because it's not necessarily something that the religion would have.
So this is different, for example, than the Russian icons that we might see.
Or even if you say Christian art or Buddhist art,
right.
That is of the religion, related to the religion. So Islamic art, this term, is a very problematic term.
It's a very problematic term. It causes some misconceptions and misunderstandings, because for Muslims, Islamic art just means Arabic calligraphy that you will see sometimes in the mosques and in the Quran itself. But when we talk about Muslim art, art that's done by Muslims, sometimes they'll do figurines and faces and whatnot, and they could depict some religious stories, but it would not be considered Islamic art.
I mean, in many ways, I found it helpful to, when I describe this, I say it's like calling all American art Christian art, which is not true. There is a folk art. There is so much more than just Christian imagery in American art, for example, or European art, for example. But it's just become this kind of very easy catchphrase that has just the development of the study of Islamic art in Europe and then in the US, it's just perpetuated. It's just been hard to find another alternative that is short, or because when you look at the map and of what the Islamic world encompasses, it's not one geographic location, it's not one country, so you can't exactly say the art of Iran, of India, because it isn't that either exactly. So many scholars and museums are using the art of the Islamic world, but that is also kind of long. So then for colloquial reasons, still Islamic art is used many times. So, and when I myself talk with my colleagues about, this is art of the Islamic world, they get confused. There's some questions or need to describe or a little more about what that means. But I think they do understand when we start talking about what Islamic art sounds like and what it really is. And in a way, this exhibition is great for that, because
and some of it leaks over, correct? Like, I mean, a lot of the geometric design of borders and colors and the calligraphy is definitely used in the Quranic calligraphy and the Quranic designs even back then, to make the Qurans and books look beautiful. And that background and borders and colors translates also into these paintings. But as soon as you get into figurines, though, and figures and faces, that's when that's when it gets a little shady.
Yeah. And actually, in this exhibition, we only have one work that is directly related to Muhammad. It's of his night journey, his ascension. So it's all the works are more related to, and they are court commissioned works, or else collected works more of maybe genre scenes, portraits that of rulers, so of secular subject matters. So I think it was surprising. I had one visitor ask, or when they thought that this would be about Islamic art, and they just said, "Oh, it's not much about religion," because there's only one paint, and then there's another painting from the Book of Omens, which is a spectacular work too, and that kind of has
people think they're going to see the Book of Kells, or again the Russian icons or something, but that's not.
No, it's not.
Do you think that we also view it differently in 2018 than when people would have viewed it in 1935, just the way that our culture is, or the way in which it is presented with a more modern sensitivity than perhaps it would have been presented in the past?
I think they would, they definitely come with more curiosity to learn more. So I think in the past it would have been, people come to see the aesthetics, to see the beauty. But I think today, at least with some visitors I talked with, they have this great desire to learn more about what do these artworks, what the context, the culture context
Right.
that they come from. So that is, I mean, this is what we hoped would happen, and
Right.
so I'm very glad that it is what happened. And I, talking with the guest co-curators, David and Hannah too, they also wanted to show Islamic art and culture as not about Islamic identity isn't only the religion.
Exactly. Right.
But and the artworks speak to that very
Right.
much. So I think, and so how they organize the show too. I mean, it's also what we give them this limitation is from our collection. So, but from the collection, they saw this great purpose in doing a show about Persian culture and how it evolves and
Right.
develop. More about the culture itself,
Right.
and that is what I think the audiences or our visitors
Right.
are looking for.
Right.
So,
Basically, the religion is a theology, but there's so many cultures that come along from this religion.
Yeah,
and I,
I mean,
think
it's
we're
just
just highlighting the Persian
so
and
many.
Indian.
I mean, just so many of these images are just so absolutely incredible. And here, this one, of course, goes along from this book, and this would just be the illustrations and then the stories. But these stories really were telling the stories, sort of these rulers. So these rulers were commissioning these,
Yeah.
and this was also a way, though, to. Was it a way to show off some of their wealth and some of their power?
Oh, yes.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one you
the average
showed.
guy's not running down to the bookstore in 1400 and picking this up. Yeah.
Especially the one you showed just now is from the Shahnameh, which is the Book of Kings, and that is one of the earliest. I mean, it's famous, and it's great that we have one of the pages from that famous book. It's the earliest and largest illustrated manuscript, and it tells the pre-Islamic history of Iran, but so many rulers, and the curators show that through the exhibition, so many subsequent rulers also commissioned their own Shahnameh and kind of to write themselves in to this history of this long history or lineage, to give themselves legitimacy. And so you have many Shahnamehs, manuscripts that are created. So the first part of the exhibition is about just the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings, and it's this gravity, this profound power that people, rulers found in just commissioning it, having it made and showing this kind of
Could you tell us a little bit about the paintbrushes that they used back then and some of the paints and how they got those beautiful colors?
Oh, well, the paintbrushes are so minute. I mean, single hair brushes, and these were made in book workshops. So it wasn't just one artist or one painter. This was like an army of different highly specialized craftsmen. Besides the painters, the calligraphers, there was people that were just their job was just to make the decorated borders, and so it was a very
So like I would think of like the monks kind of toiling away, and you would have all of these monks in this monastery, painstakingly recreating this, and some of them would have great skill and be embroidering things on the borders.
And the cost for one of these very luxury, just to think of, to be able to employ and assemble these great artisans and craftsmen, that they a building, the cost of a building is just as much as one of these manuscripts.
Even if it was to kind of point to their own place in history, if you will. What they did by bringing all of these individuals together to do this was of great, incredible historical significance.
And that's, I mean, that we have these artworks today. Also, I think the title is also very interesting, Preserved Pages, because these pages, like the Shahnameh that you were just showing, that one's from 1300s.
Oh, this one, yeah.
So
from 1300.
Yeah.
Isn't that something?
Oh, the one with the hunter.
With the hunter. Yes, yeah. Okay, from earlier.
So
that was quite the image.
So you just can tell
that beautiful
care.
blue. I'm just always curious on how they got that beautiful, beautiful shade of blues and greens back then, 1300.
Yeah.
Just there's one of my favorites in the exhibition is the Composite Horse. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
I mean, also, so besides just books
That was
commissioned
really
by the
interesting.
rulers,
That was, yeah. That's a whole like artwork in itself. You can spend hours just looking at all the different shapes within that.
It was like just a virtuosity, like just it's a drawing of a horse, but also within the horse are his body is made up of figures, animals, snakes. The hooves are made out of bunnies.
It's almost like a, can you find this?
Exactly.
Yeah, but you could spend hours looking at it.
That incredible detail.
And so from at the beginning, all these were court commissioned manuscripts, but then later on as connoisseurs, like people start getting interested in just the illustrations themselves or maybe a beautiful calligraphy, and let's just combine them and start cutting and reformatting them together.
Are there any books that are still all together?
Yes, there are.
From the 1300s.
Yes. We do have one book in our collection that's
complete.
on view to make it kind of clear to people why we call this art of the book, because these all originally came from books, whether the manuscript or the album format. And so it's just an amazing exhibition to be able to show people about.
And you were able to see it.
I was able to see a preview of it, but I do need to come and see how it's been exhibited.
And we have until January?
January 6th, and also we have a special lecture by David Roxburgh. He'll be talking on November 15th, one of our third Thursday lecture series, and it's at 6 p.m. And so he can please come and to that lecture. It should be phenomenal. And then we'll also it'll be featuring the exhibition. So.
Boy, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, tell us about some of your final thoughts and your perspective on this exhibit.
So I think everybody knows I'm really excited about this exhibit. There's no hiding it. This is great to talk about an artwork of all different cultures, especially the Persian and Indian culture, from the 1300s to the 1800s. Beautiful pieces of art, and I suggest you don't miss it because it won't be showing again for several years. So I hope you enjoyed this week on Perspectives. Thank you for joining us.